Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode, Dark Night of the Hunters, is actually the final Monster of the Day episode that we're getting for this series, because after this, they apparently start focusing on the supernatural element of the show and start making that the sole focus. So, we're getting close to the end of the show now. So, yeah, they're starting to build up to the finale of the series. But in case, yeah, this episode is about the Hunters of Secrets and Mystery Incorporated going on to go find the heart of the Jaguar so they can destroy the evil entity in those final episodes. As I mentioned, there is a monster of the day that is trying to stop them from doing that. So, but in case, the episode opens up with Angie Dinkley getting a phone call from an old friend, a man named Enrique Andalusosa, who, as we find out, is an archaeologist, and he is currently on Angie's orders. Is currently on his way to go to an ancient temple deep within the forest, which to actually find the heart of the Jaguar for the kids, and the reason he did that is because we find out a little bit later why, but yeah, he and Angie are old friends, and of course he reassures her that she's found it, and Angie then proceeds to tell him that he should be careful, and he openly points out that he'll be fine, and that there's nothing in there but him in nothing out there but him in the jungle, and that there's pretty much nothing out there that could hurt him. But in case he then proceeds to climb up to the top of the pyramid, and where in the old Mayan pyramid where the Hunters of Secrets are supposedly buried, but he then gets a closer examination of it to see if it's legit, and it's at this point where he winds up getting attacked by vines, which proceed to start completely engulfing his entire body, and he starts panicking, and Angie can only really hear bits and pieces of from the other side of the line, but it's clear that he's being attacked by something. And he tells her that since he's likely not going to have any more chances, he tells her that he loves her, and then he's dragged into the temple. At which point we see a Mayan priestess appear on top of the temple, which lets out a loud cackle. And Angie and Velma see that from the other end of the phone, and hear that from the other end of the phone, and immediately spring into action to go and rescue him, and recruit the rest of the Mystery Incorporated as well to go and help. So. It's at this point where they get on a plane to actually head out to the Yucatán, where Andalusosa was attacked. And while on the plane ride, the gang then proceeds to reassure each other about the fact that they're still friends, and that they're not being manipulated by an evil entity. Of course, Velma, Daphne, and Fred are obviously very paranoid about the fact that everything they know could be a lie, and with Daphne pointing out that Fred's love of traps and of her could all be fabricated by it, but and Fred points out that nothing could actually ever fabricate his love of traps, and then also reassures her that they're together because they want to be together, not because some evil entity made them, and that seems to get her to calm down a little bit. Meanwhile, Shaggy and Scooby are contemplating the fact that maybe they may not actually be best friends, because as we find out in this episode, this version of Shaggy has known Scooby-Doo since he was a puppy. So he believes that he's not entirely sure if they can still trust each other to be best friends, pointing out that obviously that even if though they've been together for a long time, they could have all been manipulated by the entity. But Scooby reassures him that if they're best friends, they wouldn't be able to do this, and then he then proceeds to pour an entire bag of peanuts into his mouth, spit them into Shaggy's mouth, and Shaggy concludes that that only a best friend would be willing to do that. And gross, but yeah, that's going to sell the point. So in any case, meanwhile, Velma is sitting in the seat behind them with her mom, and wonders and then proceeds to ask her about her relationship with Enrique Andalusosa, wondering if there's something she should know about. But Angie just reassures her daughter that it was many years ago, well before she actually met her father, and then proceed to explain how it was actually just a summer fling, but it was albeit a very intense one, about how But how Angie had been going out to the Yucatán to study to be a flamenco dancer, which was a big thing, and then in which point she met Enrique, who at the time was a gardener, and he was training to become a great archaeologist one day, and of course he starts training, and of course the two ultimately wound up meeting, falling in love for a little bit, and they spent several very passionate nights together. And where they would dance, they would sing, they would do a bunch of other things, and eventually Velma realizes that she probably shouldn't have asked. So yeah, it's established that they used to love each other, but now obviously Angie has her husband now, so of course she's not going to really be worried about it, but. In case they then proceed to land in the Yucatán, and what we quickly find out is that once they land in the Yucatán, several of the locals start catcalling the seemingly Daphne at first, and it's at this point where one of the flower vendors walks over and with a bushel of flowers and tells the beautiful girl that these are for her, which of course she points out, which of course Daphne thinks it's for her, so she feels honored, but then the guy then proceeds to walk right past her and just hands them to Velma, and Velma is obviously very confused. She doesn't understand why she's being handed flowers, but of course she wonders what exactly is going on, and in any case with that little thing out of the way, then we proceed to get ready to walk off and go find Andalusosa's stall. They go find his shop. Meanwhile, an unnamed woman, whose her full appearance we don't actually see until much later, but she starts stalking them. She's seemingly stalking the group, Mr. Incorporated, as well as Angie Dinkley. And just tells somebody on the other end that the suspects are the suspects are in question have landed, and that Operation Nightmare is a go. And yeah, that's all we really learn about it. She continues to follow them throughout the episode, but we don't really know who she is until much later. But when they do the unmasking and a whole bunch of other things. But in any case, it's at this point where they arrive at the shop, and with Angie pointing out that inclusive they should be able to find out what happened to Enrique in there. But when they get inside, they discover that it's actually a bit of a train wreck. That there's a whole bunch of things just strewn everywhere, all over the place, and that's a huge mess. And of course, it looks like a massive crime scene. And of course, Angie comments about what exactly it is that could have possibly gone on there. And it's at this point where Velma starts looking around. Velma and the rest of the gang start looking around, and eventually Shaggy finds a picture that he notes looks exactly like Velma, but also taken many years before she was even born. And of course, Velma, noting that a little bit odd, gets a closer look at it and notes that it is actually her mother, who is actually a dead ringer for herself. And realizing, and then finally she realizes the whole thing about how she was handed flowers. It suddenly clicks. She realizes that they've all mistaken her for Angie, and that's why she's getting all the flowers. And Angie just comments on the fact that sometimes when a beautiful woman walks into the Yucatán, it leaves a bit of an impression. So that's pretty much the only explanation we get on that. But in cases at this point, where a woman barges in and is visibly upset to see Angie. As we find out, this woman is actually Enrique Andalusosa's wife. She shows up and she is not happy about Angie, and we find out for very good reason, because obviously Angie called her husband, and he went off to go at the drop of a hat, and then he disappeared. And for that reason, she doesn't like Angie very much. But also, obviously, she thinks that Angie has showed up to try and steal her husband, which of course isn't a thing. But and then with Angie reassuring her that she's not there to steal her husband. But in cases at this point where the gang actually starts asking questions, since in the process the Mrs. Andalusosa brings up the fact that her husband went off to go look for some crazy spear, and they asked her for more information about it, pointing out that they need to find that spear to destroy the evil entity. Although they don't explain that it's an evil entity, just something that they need to save the world. But she then responds that she's not going to answer questions and tells them to stay away from her husband. Even going so far as to threaten them with a sword, that's hanging on one of the various walls, one of the antique swords that Edosos has collected, and chases them out of the shop, and they decide to come back later. Of course, they then proceed to actually come back later when it's night and she's not around. So at which point they pick the lock, break in, and start looking for clues. And of course, Shaggy points out that that's a lot easier said than done, since looking around, he quickly notes that the entire shop is a crime scene and that anything could be a clue. They absolutely have no idea what exactly it is could be a clue, so they're just kind of winging it. And eventually Scooby claims that he found a clue, which in actuality he just found food, and tells him that it would never mind, move on, which is funny, but. Eventually Velma does in fact find a clue, and reveals that there's seemingly a series of markings that are left on the wall, which she notes is obviously not where there's which is obviously indicates that there was a map there that is no longer there. And of course, when Angie points out that they actually have no idea where it actually is, since they have no idea where the map actually leads. Velma then proceeds to pull up a map of the Yucatán and winds up putting it on the wall and also marking the map with flags, so that she can actually show where all the locations are. And concludes that with Angie eventually catching up that the location on the map is actually the location of the temple, which is so. And Velma just kind of gets a little bit snarky with her about that, pointing out that obviously Angie took a bit to catch up. But in any case, it's at this point where as they're talking about this, a series of vines then proceed to emerge from the ground and proceeds to grab everybody in the shop, including Mr. Incorporated, Angie Dinkley, and pretty much that's it. And it's at this point where the vines quickly enrapture everybody, and they quickly realize they need to escape. And of course, it's at this point where Fred quickly realizes that he needs to do something, or they're all going to get ripped to pieces. And Fred eventually notices an antique sword behind Scooby, which he asks Scooby to pass him, and Scooby uses his tail to pass it. So at which point Fred then proceeds to chop up the vines and winds up freeing Shaggy, who then proceeds to use hedge clippers to free the rest of the gang as well. And eventually Scooby grabs the hedge clippers and just snips up the vines so that they don't cause any more problems. But that only enrages the person on the vines, and it's at this point the Mayan priestess emerges from the vines and tells them to stay away from the temple, otherwise they will face dire consequences. What we find out is that the Mayan priestess specifically does not like Angie Dinkley, even so much as threatening her specifically before leaving. Which of course is notably a lot scarier. But with that, Angie points out that obviously now that they know where the spear is, they just need to go find it and get it back, which is, she points out, simple, which Scooby points out is never that simple. And of course this is this point where Shaggy points out that obviously they should probably do what the Mayan priestess was talking about and just leave. But of course, Daphne points out that they're Mr. Incorporated and that fear tactics aren't going to work on them, which Shaggy just kind of looks at her funny and points out that yes, they do. But in case with that, they quickly realize that they need to actually get to the temple as quickly as possible, and points out that they should probably head over there. But before they leave, Angie just buys some canisters on the ground and asks Fred to grab them, which of course he does. And at which point they then proceed to head over to the Mayan temple, which as we find out, this is actually a several-day boat ride. And Fred is very happy about the fact that he gets to ride on a boat, pointing out that obviously he just feels like it's a very relaxing and a very soothing trip. Whereas Shaggy and Scooby test the exact opposite, because they're actually being swarmed by mosquitoes. But in any case, as they're actually riding in the boat and on their way over to the temple, it's at this point where Angie actually sees Enrique's boat crashed on the shore and has been attacked by vines, which of course first and foremost, Velma asks her how she knows that, and she merely points out that she took her out on a boat ride at least once. But also notes the obvious thing that says Angie on it, which of course obviously points out that it obviously means that it must belong to Enrique, since he kind of likes Angie a lot. But in any case, Velma also notes something strange about the boat, about how the way the vines were attacked the boat don't seem to make a whole lot of sense at a closer inspection. But as she's trying to think it through, they suddenly get attacked by vines themselves, and the Mystery Incorporated and Angie are forced to flee the boat, which then is destroyed by the vines and sinks to the bottom of the river. And Shaggy, thinking that means they can finally go home, decides to get ready to go and turn around. But of course, Daphne merely stops him. Daphne and Velma merely stop him, and Velma points out that means that they just keep going on foot, and then continues to point them in the general direction of the temple. Even though Shaggy is not happy about that fact, but in case she then proceeds to, they didn't lead them to the actual temple, where they quickly realize that they now need to actually find the way in, so that they can actually find the heart of the Jaguar, and of course, Velma conveniently took a class in hieroglyphics specifically for dead languages that nobody speaks anymore, which is a really funny and very specific detail that they just casually bring up and then never bring up again, which it's just really funny. But in case she notes that the hieroglyphics say "face your fears" and the way will show. And eventually she realizes that the hieroglyphics mean face quite literally, and presses one of the faces on one of the stone statues leading into the temple, which of course does reveal that the stairs then proceed to open up to reveal the actual entrance to the temple, which of course Angie points out is very lucky, and she's about to walk in, but it's at this point where Fred then proceeds to stop her and tells her that so that one thing he's learned from Rick Spartan's online adventuring courses is that that whenever you go into an ancient temple, there's always a trap or 5. So for that reason, he volunteers to lead the way and tells them that he's going to do everything in his power to keep them safe from traps. And Daphne merely points out that she likes the fact that he's so self-assured and so willing to take charge, pointing out that that's hot. At which point Fred proceeds to lead them into the temple, and they eventually see a mural of the Huntress of Secrets holding the heart of the Jaguar, and they conclude that it is most likely that they're most likely on the right track and that they need to follow it. And at which point they then move to actually go deeper into the temple, but Scooby almost sets off a pressure plate, which Fred stops him for, and then immediately identifies the kind of trap that Scooby was about to set off. Noting the fact that it seemed to be a net trap, and sure enough, to test that, he ducks, presses the pressure plate, and then the net proceeds to swing over their heads, and it is in fact revealed to be a net trap, and Shaggy thanks Scooby thanks Fred for showing them the trap, and then proceeds to continue onward. And this winds up being a continued thing where every time they come to a new room in the temple, Fred identifies a trap, and he is able to accurately conclude. The second trap he finds is a light sensitive trap that fires blow darts at light sources, which of course he realizes means they just need to go in without lights, and that winds up working. But also he finds out a trap with a light sensor on it. That's when he lays his hand through, it winds up summoning 2 crushing walls that smash things, and he quickly realizes that it's old school, but it works, and they decide to go around the light. And finally, he notices that the final trap is actually breath sensitive and fires saw blades at them, which he notes is actually a classic, and then proceeds to tell everybody to hold their breath, which they do, and eventually they arrive at the main chamber of the actual thing, where they arrive in the main chamber of the temple, and they quickly realizes this is the main burial chamber where the Huntress of Secrets were buried, presumably with the heart of the Jaguar. And it's a massive room where all the members of the Huntress of Secrets are buried in front of a statue of themselves. So yeah, it quickly becomes apparent that they're very easily able to identify who's who. At which point they start sniffing around trying to find the heart of the Jaguar, and eventually they do find it being held by the Daphne Blake equivalent, whoever, she doesn't have a name. They just call her the Daphne Blake. She's just supposed to be, she's the pretty one, essentially. But, in case after getting a closer look, Fred, they do note that this is in the heart of the Jaguar, and Fred gets a closer look at it, and he winds up confirming that it is in fact trap-free. So and tells Scooby that it's all his to take, and Scooby takes it, and then we finally get a good look at the heart of the Jaguar finally, which is of course, as I mentioned, is revealed to be a giant spear. But it's at this point where the temple starts crumbling. And Fred is upset because he pointed out that he tested it for traps and noted that there shouldn't be any traps. But Daphne then points out that it's okay and that everybody makes mistakes. But then it's revealed that actually it wasn't a trap at all, but actually the Mayan priestess who showed up with her plants and then insists that and then Fred is just relieved at the fact that he wasn't wrong. And at which point the Mayan priestess threatens them again, telling them that they shouldn't take things that don't belong to them, and that they're not supposed to they can't take the heart of the Jaguar without a fight. And of course Shaggy and Scooby insist that they were only borrowing it and that they were going to bring it back. But and when she finds out that they were only there for the spear, that only causes her to fly in a bigger rage, and demands that and points out that they should have been there also for Enrique and De La Sosa, which Scooby admits he openly forgot they were looking for him as well, which is funny. But in case it's at this point where the Mayan priestess threatens them and threatens that she's going to destroy them, starting with Angie Dingley, who she then proceeds to grab in her vines. And it's at this point where Angie decides to tell Fred what the canisters are for, and tells him that now is as good a time as any to start spraying things. And of course, what we find out is that Fred starts spraying them, and it causes the vines to actually wither. And when she finds out, and of course they don't really know what's in the container at first, but then they note that it actually has a chemical compound, which, as Angie points out, is a natural chemical pickling agent, which she admits she's been using in her garden for years, and points out it's one of the best natural agents that she's found for pickling. But in case with that, with Fred still spraying vines so they can escape, they eventually escape the main chamber of the Huntress' Secrets burial temple, which eventually the Mayan priestess does decide to chase after them, and because of their previous knowledge of how all the different traps work, they're able to actually successfully escape the Mayan priestess, while the Mayan priestess just manages to set off pretty much every trap that they avoided on the way in. So because the Mayan priestess, she glows, she makes loud snarling noises, she sets off pretty much all the traps, and eventually she winds up getting caught in the net trap, and that's how she's defeated. And of course, at this point where Mystery Incorporated then proceed to drag her outside once they have her, and then proceed to unmask the Mayan priestess, revealing that it's actually Enrique and De La Sosa. And of course, Velma isn't surprised at all, pointing out that they've been staring them in the face all the time. Pointing out that Angie mentioned that she got a closer look at the vines at one point, and noted that the vines don't actually seem to be native to the Yucatán. She reveals that they would have had to have been cultivated and grown by someone who knew what they were doing. And since Angie mentioned that De La Sosa was a gardener, it makes perfect sense that he would be the one to do it. But also, she points out that obviously Enrique and De La Sosa, he would have been the perfect person to do this, because obviously she also noted that his boat, while destroyed, also was a bit suspicious, and noted that the vines were merely tied on and not actually grabbing the boat, which she notes was also suspicious. But Also, she pointed out that the Mayan priestess had a strange hatred for Angie Dinkley, which she notes didn't seem to throw them a little bit off course a little bit. But then she also finally asks De La Sosa why, and De La Sosa then proceeds to reveal that he did it for love. As he goes on to explain, he's loved Angie since she left, and and has been harboring feelings for her for many years. And the reason he created the Mayan priestess was to get her to come back and investigate, which would have and test to see if she truly loved him, which of course she openly admits she also openly admits she doesn't really have feelings for him anymore, because that was many years ago. Obviously, she's moved on. She has a husband. She has a kid. And she points out that, and she tells Enrique and Dolasosa that he probably should have moved on as well. At which point Enrique's wife then proceeds to emerge out of the jungle, and after calling Enrique a horrible, despicable man, she then insists that Angie can have her, but Angie insists that she doesn't want her husband, and that she already has a lovely husband already. At which point the woman who's been stalking finally reveals herself as Lieutenant Tomina Kaminsky, who, as we find out, has been trailing the gang since they left Crystal Cove. And when Mystery Incorporated asks her why, it's then revealed that actually everyone else is also there, and she reveals that she actually got in contact with Kaminsky, and told her to follow the gang around, pointing out that the gang that she actually had a dream telling them that the gang would need her help, and for that reason she asked Kaminsky to come in and help with keep an eye on them and make sure everything went smoothly. And of course Velma just rolls her eyes and decides to give up. At which point Kaminsky tells Mayor Nettles to grab their prisoner and then bring it back to her carrier. And of course they then proceed to do that, and the rest of the gang then proceed to leave, now with the heart of the Jaguar in hand. And they're very happy, but Velma actually stops Angie for a brief minute and tells her mom that and she's been having a bit of what she's been going through, about how she's been mostly using facts and logic to figure things out up until this point, but after everything that's been happening, she's been having a hard time doing that. And she then proceeds to go on that she usually uses facts and logic because she doesn't believe in the supernatural, but now she's getting to the point where she might have to be. And she just reassures her that she didn't do anything wrong, and then reassures her that regardless of what happens, she stays true to herself, and that it'll eventually work itself out. And then proceeds to pull her daughter into a hug with Velma then proceeding to smile, and then the two proceed to go home with Angie just ending the episode on the fact that she's been wearing a garter for like 5 days, and she's a bit stinky. So yeah, they then proceed to get back into the helicopter and go home. So yeah, this episode, as I mentioned, is the final Monster of the Day episode, and I kind of like it. I kind of like it because it is an interesting monster, and that the monster is just kind of controlling plants when actually he's just creating fast-growing plants, which is fun. But this episode is the final one because now Mystery Incorporated has everything they need to actually go and destroy the evil entity. They have the key, they have the 4 keys, and presumably the knowledge that they need to use them. But also they now have the heart of the Jaguar, which is the actual weapon they need to destroy the evil entity. So yeah, they now have everything they need to destroy it, and now they just need to go on a quest to actually find the evil entity and destroy it before Professor Pericles, of course, sets it free, because he currently has the Planespheric Disc. That's what his plan is. But in any case, yeah, this is a fun episode. I very much enjoyed it. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well if you want to help support me. It does really help me out. It's only a couple bucks a month, and I would just very much appreciate it if you did that. But also, be sure to go and check out my Twitch. Link is down in the description. I'm currently trying to push for affiliate. I am currently streaming Miitopia and Pokemon Legends Arceus over there. So if you want to see those, by all means, again, link is down in the description. Please go check those out. Please go help support me. I would very much appreciate it. And also, if you want to see more content from me other than that, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. And finally, if you just want to see any more additional content from me, I actually did a review called Courage Month, which was the thing I did previously to this one. And this one, and it does connect because the final thing I reviewed for Courage Month was actually a crossover movie between Courage the Cowardly Dog and Scooby-Doo, which is what prompted me to look into Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. So please go check that original series out. I worked really hard on it. I would appreciate it if you did that. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!